I'm Joel Arnold with Foundation Baptist College. We're continuing in our study of elementary Greek. And that brings us here to chapter 15, which is now the perfect and pluperfect indicative. So just a reminder of what we've done to this point with the other verb tenses. We studied early on the present tense, and that was this simple framework, oase, amaneta, usi. When we moved to the imperfect tense, nu, sigma blank, mente, nu. And so a separate set of charts we did have to memorize, main, sa, ta, methys, and ta for the middle passives. We went to, after that, to the futures, and for the futures, we just stuck in a sigma. We were able to use the original primary endings, oase, amaneta, usi, mai, sai, tai, methys, then tai. With the passives, we use that same middle passive ending, but we had to put in a theta, eta. And so we ended up with face, amai, face, and so forth. After that, we worked through the aorists. And in the first aorists, we had the same endings as the imperfect, what we call the secondary active endings, nu, sigma, blank, mente, nu. We attached those with a sigma alpha. And in the passives, we put a theta, eta. The second aorists, we recognized some exceptions in how these things work out. Okay, moving to the perfect, the first thing I would like to do is just recover something that I talked about as a set of morphological markers or grammatical markers. And the grammatical markers were there to remind us of how to recognize different verbs as they come about. And so we saw the epsilon augment as a sign of the past time indicative. We saw the sigma as a future, theta, eta as the sign of a passive, sigma alpha as an aorist. And this is our last set now. The last grammatical marker I want you to know is the kappa alpha, which is the sign of the perfect. I suppose I could include also with this, the kappa alpha, the perfect, I could also include something we're going to learn about, reduplication. So if you want to, that's also a really helpful marker, honestly, as an additional grammatical marker, thing to look out for with the perfect, and just a pattern that will help you identify the verb. But towards that end, let's actually look at what it looks like when we're rolling out the perfect tense. And the good news is that where for a couple of the verb tenses we've worked through, the future and the aorist, we needed to learn three separate forms, the active, the middle, thirdly the passive, all three of them separate. The good news here is we just have two forms. So we have the perfect active and then the perfect middle passive, and they go together. And your pattern looks like this. You know, it may be easier, it often is helpful for students to remember a form if they'll take a bit and try to guess at what's going on. So can I encourage you to try that? Take a second, look at the forms, see if you can figure out a pattern. Maybe one kind of qualification I can make down here under the third person plural, this down here, those are just two different ways it could be formed, two different patterns you may encounter. So just take a look. Anything you can pick up, what do you think is going on here? Pause the video if you need a little bit of time. But the basic answer is that you're going to look for two different phenomena. You're going to look for, first off, a kappa alpha throughout, what I've told you up above. And so I've got ka, kas, ke, kamen, kate, kasi, or kan, one of those forms. If you're looking for the endings work really basically identically to the aorist. So elusa, elusas, elusa, eluse we had with the aorist. Well, that's exactly what I've gotten down here. Elusamen, elusata, and elusan. The elusan would be analogous to this form right here, lalukan. Okay, so I've got good analogy to the aorist, and if you're familiar with your aorist forms, you'll be fine there. Just use a kappa alpha instead of a sigma alpha. One of the problems you have, though, is that the kappa alpha is not completely dependable. It does do some funny things sometimes. And you can guess this if you just imagine how that kappa is going to go up against other consonants. Well, there are going to be changes. There are going to be stem adjustments. Things are going to happen in certain verb forms. So what I think might be an even more dependable pattern, so long as you recognize what happens in certain combinations, is on the front end of the verb, we have something that I just wrote it up above, reduplication. And reduplication is an interesting phenomenon. Actually, at one point in my life, we lived in the Philippines for about 8 years. And there's a similar phenomenon that happens in that language. It's not an unusual phenomenon in other languages. The pattern or the way that you form reduplication is that you're just going to take the stem that you're working with. So in this case, we're working with luo. And you're going to take this first letter, take the lambda, pull it around and double it. Okay, so reduplicate. What comes in between, in the case of Greek anyway, is that we'll put in something like the augment. Now, helpful, it's not an augment, and don't call it an augment. But I mean, you can at least see the pattern as there was an epsilon augment before. Okay, I've got something at least related. And then the letter that was here, doubled over, okay, reduplicated, lelu. And this would follow with a lot of other verbs, okay? So many of the verbs, I'm thinking of a verb that starts out with a beta. Well, you would bring that beta around. And so I would have be, and it goes on, bebeka. But I've got the reduplicated beta, and I put the epsilon in between. Okay, so a large number of verbs will follow exactly this type of pattern, and that's what I've got with the perfect forms here. Reduplicated lambda, epsilon, then put on my stem, put on my kappa alpha, and the secondary active endings. Over here with the middle passive, I'm going to have, this is helpful, at least this part's consistent. I've got my reduplication again. So once again, I do think it's really useful to use reduplication as a thing you're looking for, recognizing what I'll talk about in a bit. Some verbs will not make it as obvious, but reduplication on the front. And in this case, what I've got is reduplication plus stem plus, this will be a little bit of a plot twist, primary middle passive endings. Okay, by primary, you're going back to those endings that you used with oase amenadusi. Oase amenadusi, I should say better. The middle passives were mai sai tai methisthan tai. Well, mai sai tai methisthan tai, if you remember this form right here, we always changed it to an eta iota subscript. And that was true in the present, that was true in the future. You might have wondered why we made you learn sai, rather than just teaching you mai eta iota subscript tai. And the answer is, well, here. In this spot, it doesn't change. And the reason it doesn't change is there's another difference. I don't have connecting vowels. When I did that before, we can look at it. If we looked at the present forms here, we used lu stem plus ah connecting vowel mai. The present forms, I had to put in a connecting vowel all the way throughout. That's what drove this change right here with the eta iota subscript. Well, it turns out with the perfect, I have no such connecting vowels. And that's what then means I just end up with la lu mai, la lu sai, la lu tai, la lu metha, la lu sta, la lun tai. Okay, so there you've got it. We've learned, or we've worked through, the perfect active and perfect middle passive endings. And as far as those go, then this would be your basic or kind of your starting pattern for how I would use the perfect. I'll show you in a second some of the changes that do happen with the reduplication, some of the variants that can happen. But before we do that, let's go out and take a quick look at what the perfect tense signifies, as in, what does it mean? What's the significance of the verb as a tense? What's it communicating to us? If you remember this square, this chart, this was something that we worked with, recognizing that every tense, you think of tense, you think of time in English. Well, every tense actually has the two components, aspect and time. And so far what we've encountered were our starting set of tenses. Those were all in this quadrant, the linear. So we learned the present and the imperfect. And my clue or my key there for translating, try to include an ing. Okay, I call them linear. Plummer would refer to these as, sorry, this is written incorrectly. He would refer to these as imperfective. Imperfective forms, the linear forms, present or future. Okay, the next set that we worked with were the simple forms, and so we worked with future and aorist. And Plummer would refer to these as perfective forms. So it's a simple I ate, I eat, I will eat. And the last set we looked at were the completed forms. Let me get this imperfective back in here. The completed forms have, has, had, and Plummer would refer to these as stative verbs. I had eaten, I have eaten, I will have eaten. And if you put those out into a square with time and aspect, you can see all the different variations or the derivations each one of these forms worked out. Okay, so when we work now with the perfective and, or excuse me, the perfect and the pluperfect, that is in this completed form. And my key for translation there, get in a have, has, had. One of those forms. With the perfect, you're going to go with have or has. Get that in there, and you'll be looking at completed, an event that has consequences, or an event where the results or the relevance continues on into the present. Okay, if I put that into a different diagram form, we talked about every tense has time and aspect. It's split. The present time linear aspect, I am eating. The future time simple aspect, I will eat. There's no ing because it's not linear. The imperfect past linear, I was eating. Aorist, I ate, past time simple aspect. And then now with the perfect, this is the first time we've had a perfective, or excuse me, we've had a completed or stative aspect. Plummer's language, stative. I have eaten cheese. Past time, completed aspect. Just to show those out, all of them together, this is what that would look like. And you want to be able to grasp with some pretty good immediate clarity how to translate each one of these forms and recognize what they mean so that you're rendering it appropriately as you work your way through the New Testament. Okay, here's everybody's favorite part of working with the perfect. And it's the acknowledgement that there are some differences that will happen with the reduplication pattern. So I talked a little bit ago about the reduplication as, hey, take the letter, pull it around the front, and put an epsilon in between. Now you have reduplication. I want you to be aware, however, that there are exceptions, honestly, to how this actually works out. So there are going to be verbs, for instance, where instead of the front letter reduplicating, I will actually have the first letter lengthened. Okay, so one of these that does exactly this kind of pattern is a favorite verb, or a familiar verb anyway, agapao. And agapao, when turned into the into the perfect, the perfect of agapao is going to be agapeka. Okay, and in this case, what I've done is I've taken the alpha, and I've turned the alpha into an eta. That's my reduplication. If you remember, the aorist of this form was agapesa. So, I mean, the recognition that in this case, honestly, the reduplication versus the simple augment, they're not distinguishable. They look exactly the same. Okay, so recognize sometimes I'll just get my first vowel lengthened rather than a full-on reduplication or doubling. I've got cases where I will have a kind of an unusual, maybe a surprise, it's just an exceptional form. So the form akuo will go to ake koa. Okay, now, you know, look at that for a long time. It's not exactly obvious what happened here. I think the you're tempted to look at these and say, aha, I see reduplication. This is more expressive of the kappa alpha. And so the stem is actually up here. And so the reduplication just didn't happen. One that is another like very common verb that you want to be familiar with, erkamai. And erkamai in the perfect, which doesn't occur a ton of times, but enough that you have to know it or you want to be watching for it, elelutha. Okay, completely, honestly, a little just unexpected how I got there. I've found this easy enough to memorize, though it's not actually true, but I've imagined that this is the reduplication. It's not. But it works well enough. And I mean, perhaps morphologically, maybe there were roots in that. If you remember, the second aorist of Urkamai was aelthon. And so this L right here, arguably, I mean, maybe that is the reduplication. Working through the history of how we got there, who's to know? Something that's important to know in respect to these reduplicated forms that follows the pattern we did with the aorist. If I've got a compound verb like katabaino, okay, katabaino will do the reduplication just in between. So kata, the preposition on the front, is going to be split, and the reduplication is going to go in between. So I'll have kata, and then bebeka. Okay, now I'm recognizing there's some oddity here. I don't see, it's not like a simple, this plugin, put your pieces together. But I think, again, like we've started to pick up now, you'll pick up patterns. There's a kappa alpha. That's a little bit of a clue or a nudge that we might be looking at a perfect. And then here's my reduplication. The beta epsilon, they're reduplicated. But the key is to recognize I'm not trying to reduplicate out here or something. The prepositions move over and we reduplicate on the original stem and then stick the preposition back on. Okay, and then from there I would just say, one other pattern that's worth recognizing or being prepared for would be if you have an aspirate or a verb that starts off with a phi or a theta. These verbs, or a key actually is a third. These three nouns, or these three consonants, if a verb starts off with that, let's say the verb phino, okay, what I'm going to get in this case is a pe on the front of it. Therapeuo, verb meaning heal, okay, what I would get is a tau on the front of it. And what I would get for a key, in this case, we'll do ka'amai. Okay, what I would get on the front of that is a kappa. All right, so that's your key, just to recognize a phi is like a P with a aspirate, PH, we would do it in English. A theta is a tau with an aspirate. We would do it as TH in English. Since we don't have in English exactly a key sound, but if you want to think of it like a CH, which for us does a cha. But in that case, yeah, kappa plus an aspirate, or an H for us in English. And therefore, the reduplication will be not the aspirate form. I think the idea goes that you are, because you've started off the verb already, the aspirant is kind of, it's like, think of it like a rough breathing mark that's in here. I mean, it's not in there, but it's that kind of effect. That's not going to be reduplicated. And so the phi represented by the P, etc. Beyond that, you have just exceptional forms that you'll have to get used to seeing and being familiar with. One of the really critical ones that comes up a lot is the odd verb oida. Okay, now oida is, the meaning of oida is to know. And it happens a lot across the New Testament. If I just pull this up, I've got 294 hits across the entire New Testament, enough. You're going to see it constantly, and you want to be familiar with it enough to work with it. So what's going on with oida? It's going to be parsed or glossed as perfect. It is perfect. It's an older verb. It uses an older letter that we no longer have, and therefore the reduplication it's not something you're recognizing. It doesn't look like reduplication. If we just work down, and you just see a series of examples down here. Here I've got a participle, which is one of the forms we'll learn in the future. Here, this is a second person plural, first person plural. Okay, so some of these forms are recognizable enough. This is a third person singular. The forms of oida, you can think of it in terms of the endings. It's going to look like aorist. Okay, so it'll be with an alpha. The basic flow of it would be oida, oidos, oide, oidamen, oideta, oidan, I think it does, on the end, third person plural. That's your basic pattern. It is going to be glossed as perfect because it technically is perfect. And yet, it will be translated as present. Okay, so translate, if you go down throughout, well, we can look at the way the ESV rendered. Your father knows what you need. That means know. Your father knows, present tense. For your father knows. If then you are evil, you who are evil know, present tense, how to give. So translate it as a present, even though it is perfect in tense. Okay, if you're parsing it out on a quiz or a test, you want to write perfect, but you translating it want to render it as a present. And that's just honestly the oddity that is oida. It's the one verb. It's a weird one. This is just the way it works out. Let me show you a couple of places where the perfect is, I would just say it's beautiful. It's theologically beautiful. It's rich, and it helps us even as we think about the text, and something that would be a very helpful preaching point. So I'm going to go down through a couple of passages. Here's Galatians, and I'll read on the Greek side. For through the law I died to the law, or in respect to the law. Here, this is a second aorist, I died. And second aorist, first person singular. We can put up the grammar at the bottom so you can see. In order that to God I should live. This is a form you haven't learned yet. It's a subjunctive, aorist subjunctive, but has that sense of should. I, with Christ, I have been crucified. Okay, now the way that this works out in terms of the reduplication, I don't reduplicate this sigma tau, and that's expected a bit when you have a consonantal cluster. Reduplicating that whole consonantal cluster would get odd. So if you're going to do something soon, staraumai, I mean, it would be unworkable. What makes this a perfect, in this case, passive, is that I see the my ending on it. And the lack of a connecting vowel. Staurao is the verb. It's a contract verb. Okay, so this is lengthened. There's no connecting vowel. A maisaitai, or primary middle passive ending, it forces it has to be a perfect. And I have been crucified with. Paul is fond of doing this. He'll say we died with, we were buried with, we were crucified with, we were raised with Christ. So that soon attached to the front of a verb with Christ. This is another option with the date called the dative of association. Okay, so point of it goes, if I'm looking at this theologically, I have been crucified with Christ. It puts the time in the past, an event that happened long ago, has ongoing results, and this is one of the ways that the perfect expresses. It continues to affect my present. It has ongoing relevance to now. An event that happened continues into the present. I have been crucified with Christ. Here's another example in Romans 5. I've got two different verbs going on here. For if we have been, this is genomai, united with the similarity or likeness of his death. Also, even, okay, these two together kind of put, so also or likewise even, we will be with his resurrection. Or what Paul's done, because this is a genitive, he's implied or he's assumed the similarity of his resurrection. Okay, the significance of this perfect right here, if we have been united. I can see here an important exceptional form that you want to know. This is the form of genomai, and it's gone to gon, which is at least recognizable. You see the reduplication on the front, that's recognizable. This amen ending, it's the perfect active. So the kappa isn't here, but I can see the endings and it's working out. Okay, perfect active indicative form of genomai, important verb. And it is the idea, if I have in the past been united with Christ, like here is an event that's already happened. My uniting with Christ or being united with Christ is done. Well, then that has ongoing, continuing implications now. Because I'm united with Christ, then I am also united with him in his resurrection. 2 verses later. For one who has died, and this is a form you haven't learned yet, it's a participle, but the one having died has been justified, or has been, the ESV has rendered, set free from sin. We could actually recover, though, this kind of the justified, declared righteous from sin. The guilt that I carry righteously and justly, I'm declared righteous from that. And this is from a verb. I think you've learned dikaios. Dikaiosune is the noun, and dikaiao is the verb. Okay, it's reduplicated on the front. So there's the de, taken from this delta, reduplicated over here. Dikaiao, I would have the omicron here and the ending. And it's because there's no connecting vowel, this is lengthened. The connecting vowel omicron is lengthened. There's no connecting vowels, it won't combine with anything. So I have been, or the one who has died has been freed from sin, third person singular. The significance of this goes, there's an event, I have been justified. I have been declared righteous in respect to sin. Well, and that absolutely shapes my present, doesn't it? One or two other examples. How about let's go to John 3. And this will be helpful because it gives us an example of a verb that starts with a preposition. So no one also has descended or has ascended. Ana on the front of it means up. And this is bino, to go up. No one has gone up into the heavens except ame, together we can translate in English as except. Except the one who came down from heaven. This is a participle. We'll learn those in our upcoming lessons. But right here, this is recognizable. You've got the ek preposition, from heaven. It's genitive because it's the object of this preposition, ek. And the ha on the front of it controls the whole expression. The one from heaven, having come down. The Son of Man. Okay, now take a look at this, and the form bino, the stem has changed a bit, but it's recognizable. I've got a kappa alpha in this case because it's third singular, kappa epsilon in the center. Ana is a preposition, and so the reduplication happens in between. The beta epsilon or beta alpha in here, I'm pulling the beta to the front, putting an epsilon in between. Reduplication here, put it all together, yeah, it's a perfect active indicative third person singular. And 17 chapters later, I get a bit of maybe echo, I don't know. Jesus is saying to her, so indirect object, dative, personal pronoun, do not cling to me. This is a command. We haven't learned those yet, or an imperative. But this is a first person singular genitive, you know that. Because, or for, I have not yet ascended to the Father. Okay, this is the not yet. You can see the oo on the front of it. You have learned oo or ook for not. The for is put inside one word. It's called postpositive, but for or de, certain words don't want to be outside the front of the sentence, so they move in one word. And I've got the same verb again. Because I have not yet ascended to the Father. And he goes forward, go to my brothers also and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father and my God and your God. Okay, but right here, the notion I have not yet ascended to the Father is to say this event, the ascension, hasn't happened, and that ascending would have ongoing significance or consequences. This could be a case for the third category that Plummer gives, which is just past action from a holistic perspective. So in that idea, it would be the whole idea of having ascended, that whole concept. That would be shifted in the past. This has not yet happened that I would have, or that I have ascended. And so viewed from a whole perspective, Christ is putting it in that sense, the whole view, or the event of ascending with its consequences going from it. Okay, so I think with those pieces, you can get a sense of the significance of the perfect. I'm going to end out here with one last reading, and that's First John. And I'm going to First John because that is the book that we want to aim for translating by the time we finish this course. So I've got a handful of perfects in that first paragraph, and I want to just read through it. I'll read through it fairly quickly. But take a look at the perfects as we go, and you'll get a sense of this pattern here as well. So 1 John chapter 1, very workable, doable Greek to analyze. So 1 John starts off, what was, this is a relative pronoun. This is a form of a me. It's the imperfect active indicative third singular. From the beginning, object of the preposition a, up, or apa. So the omicron is dropped off because we're starting with a vowel here. What was from the beginning, what we have heard. And so I've got a kuo here. This is one of the forms I showed you. I can see roots or similarities in here. This is actually the stem. This is the kappa alpha combination in here, koamen, kaamen. And so I've got reduplication in here, but you just have to be I guess for mnemonic purposes, you could think of this as reduplication. You just have to be familiar with it enough that it is recognizable to you as the perfect. What we have heard, what we have seen. Here again, if you're looking for the reduplication, it's not immediately obvious. The verb is harao, so this is the stem here. I've got kappa alpha after, I've got my ending. And this is the reduplication up here. In the absence of a starting consonant, then we've gone with the epsilon plus a rough breathing mark. Harao, the rough breathing mark has come around. And so this is the reduplication. What we have heard, what we have seen. With our eyes, ophthalmos, we've learned that. This is a dative, and it can be translated in this case with. That's an option for the dative. What we touched. This is just an aorist. You can see the sigma alpha in the middle. That's your marker there. And this is the augment on the front. The verb is just the aamai. So what we saw. And our hands, this is a third declension noun. And so recognizing that ending, but you could do just as well by knowing your articles. Article is your friend. What our hands touched. And here I'm back to another aorist. So what our eyes looked upon and our hands touched. So aorist third person plural. We have touched. And concerning the word of life, this sounds like the Gospel of John, chapter 1. The word of life, the life was manifested. And that actually is what follows. And the life was manifested, and we have seen it. So I've got a repetition of the verb that I had up here, repeated down here. And we are testifying and proclaiming. These are all present. These two are present active indicatives. We are proclaiming to you the life, the eternal life, which was with the Father and was manifested, aorist passive indicative, third singular, to us. Okay, here's my third time with this verb. What we have seen and we have heard, again, repeated from up above, we are proclaiming also to you, in order that you also should be having fellowship with us. Okay, this is one of the first forms we've hit here that you don't have the tools to translate, which is really exciting to be able to get down through 3 verses and honestly, you know how to do everything. This is a subjunctive that's coming soon, but you're able to make a lot of progress even without having learned that. In order that you should have fellowship with us, and even, so you're going to de and kai together. ESV does it, and indeed. But and the fellowship, our fellowship, is with the Father. Object of the preposition meta in the meaning of with, takes a genitive. And with his Son, Jesus Christ. This is genitive matching son because it's renaming. And so when you rename, you say it another way. Joel Arnold, professor, father, If you stack up those positives, they're going to match in number, in case, and in number. So, and with his son, Jesus Christ. And we are writing present tense. We, subject, are writing these things in order that your joy should be, and this is a complex construction, having been fulfilled. This is a participle, so you haven't learned participles, but you can pick up the reduplication on the front of it. And it does turn out, since this is a passive participle, I've got a pattern down here with a men that inclines me towards, it's kind of analogous to the primary middle passive endings that we picked up in this last lesson. So plerao, reduplicated in a participle form. You haven't learned, that's okay not to know it, but at least you can recognize some of the characteristics. And I'll end here because we have a final perfect in this sentence. And this is the message which, relative pronoun, we have heard, perfect, and that's my form that I've got several times up above, from him, and are proclaiming to you, that God is light and darkness, skotia, in him is not at all. Mia is the word one, ude, not, and so putting it together, you could say something like not one bit. Darkness is in him, not at all. So you can practice there a bit, and exciting to have the tools, honestly, to put together. Reading, extensive reading of 1 John, and even now to be able to incorporate in the perfects. There are some expression or some instances across the New Testament of the pluperfect. And the difference between the pluperfect and the imperfect, if the imperfect is a past with a stative or a perfect completed sense, the pluperfect would just take us further into the past. Okay, so sometimes in English, we'll talk about a perfect and a past perfect. Okay, rendering that into English, a normal perfect would be I have done a thing. I have gone skydiving. A pluperfect would be I had. Push it further into the back. And with the pluperfect, just so you can see some examples, they don't occur a whole lot. But here would be examples. It had been founded upon a rock. Okay, so it comes from themeliao. Themelios might be a familiar word for you. Here's the stem right there, here, themeli. And it's reduplicated. Okay, so expect with the pluperfect, you will see reduplication. This is actually an expression of the reduplicated stem anyway. I have the no and the augment on the front of it. It's actually representing reduplication. And here, right, this little piece right here is going to be a good pattern for you with the pluperfect. Kappa, epsilon, iota. Okay, similarly here, kappa, epsilon, iota. Again here, these forms, the kappa has collapsed into it, and so you're not seeing it. This is actually those forms of oida. So a lot of these end up being oida. Once you take those out, most of them have been set aside. This is a form of didomi, which is a me verb, something we learn later, but I can see my kappa epsilon iota. I can see a kappa epsilon iota here, and there's my reduplication on the front. So you don't need to be that familiar with the pluperfect. It occurs 86 times. A lot of those actually are with oida, and so if you took oida out, you've removed a lot of the instances. And it is to say then, main thing, if you want to be prepared for the pluperfect, watch for reduplication, and watch for a kappa epsilon iota infix, where the kappa alpha would go, kappa epsilon iota. And then from there, largely, I think you'll hit them. You could glance over at the English translation, and if you see the had, you're probably looking at a pluperfect. You can mouse over it in most Bible software. It's not occurring that often enough that you need to be able to memorize a list and memorize the chart and recognize it. But The method that I use, I look for reduplication, kappa, epsilon, iota, and you're going to pick up most of the instances that way. Well, I'm going to end out here with a congratulations. So we have at this point worked through all of the indicative verbs. Okay, so we've got a total of 5 tenses. I put them up here earlier. You've learned all of them. And we have then no more indicative tenses to work on. Okay, they're finished. You've completed it. You did it. There's the whole set: present, imperfect, future, aorist, and perfect. You've completed the set. What remains to us would be another set or types of verbs, participles. Those will be a bit of a challenge, something to work through. And we have infinitives, subjunctives, and imperatives. Each one of those gets about a lesson. But you've, at this point, conquered the main part of the verb system, which is huge. And you've also, in the process, gotten to the point where you can do a good bit of translating. Add in the participles and you'll be even further along, just that much more capable of handling the text. And there's a lot of richness in that. So I want you to have an appreciation of what accomplishment this represents. This typically is the end of first semester in the way that we divide it at Foundation Baptist College. And you've accomplished a lot if you are able to know these forms and use them. We'll continue on the next lesson working on adjectives and how adjectives fit into the whole structure of sentences.